55s, the same proportion of 16 to 24-year-olds prefer Sharia law to British law. That falls to 17% for older Muslims. And nearly three-quarters of young Muslims want women to wear the hijab, compared with only 28% of over 55s. Well, the report's author says the results suggest that government policy may be to blame for the sharpening divide. And joining us now is that report author, Munira Mirza, from the policy think tank Policy Exchange. A very good morning to you, Munira. Of all the findings of this really quite shocking report, the one that jumps out to many, I imagine, will be the fact that 1 in 8 young Muslims, by which we bracket them, I think, up from 16 to 24, 1 in 8 are prepared to fight the West and admire Al-Qaeda. What say you?
Well, actually, they didn't say they were prepared to fight for the West. They just said they admire organisations like Al-Qaeda who are prepared to fight against the West. And I think what we found is that there is a very small minority of younger Muslims who feel that disillusioned with the West and what it has to offer. What we tried to do in the report is look at some of the broader cultural factors behind that shift. Why is it that younger Muslims, rather than older Muslims, feel more attached to their religious identity? And we've argued that multiculturalism is partly responsible for this.
Let's just go into the causes in a second. You'd characterise as a very small minority some of the figures. You just used that phrase then in this report. But 40% backing Sharia law, that's not a very small minority.
Well, I mean, there's a distinction, I think, between those who support terrorists, which is a small minority.
40% back Sharia law, most of us know what Sharia law means. It's not something that many Britons would be happy living under.
Absolutely, and I think there is a problem, a cultural problem. People feel disillusioned, although it has to be said that the majority of Muslims do not want to live under Sharia law, and the majority would like Sharia law to be reformed so that it's more in line with modern values about justice and inequality. But I think that the broader cultural problem that Muslims express here, or younger Muslims express, is a sense that there's a kind of anti-Western feeling, the idea that, the West is greedy, is materialistic, doesn't have any values. And what we found is that it's not just Muslims who are talking about this. Actually, younger people in general are showing some disillusionment with the West. And it's particularly strong amongst Muslims. And it is a problem. We do have to address it.
Aren't you worried that a lot of that hatred, distrust, whatever you want to call it, is profoundly misinformed? I dare use the word ignorant, really. I mean, 1 in 5 of those surveyed who were happy to blame the West for their grievances didn't know who the Palestinian president was, Mahmoud Abbas. So on the one hand, you get this determination to detest the West without really knowing a great deal about what's going on in the world.
Absolutely, and I think you have certain community leaders or Muslim lobby groups talking about how important foreign policy is for Muslims. And in fact, I think a lot of this is about bravado, about showing, this is who I belong to, my community. But in reality, Muslims are not particularly engaged with foreign affairs issues. It's almost a badge of victimhood. It's about saying we identify with those victims over in Palestine, over in Chechnya, and so on. And really what they're doing is they're expressing their own sense of victimisation, their own alienation. And I think that the role of government and of authorities is not to treat Muslims as Muslims, but to recognise that Muslims are citizens like everyone else. And we should not divide or distinguish between groups based on their different cultural identities, but treat everyone equally.
David Cameron's going to be talking later today. He's going to be talking about the role of, I suppose, women like you, of young Muslim women who've got something to say, the need for them to get an education. How to encourage more voices like yours, more voices like Irshad Manji to come forward, free of fear, which, let's face it, a lot of the more outspoken voices, particularly among women, have. How do you encourage people like you to come forward and say what you've got to say?
Well, I'm sure that there are women out there. I'm sure there are young men out there. I mean, actually, there are plenty of young women who supported Al-Qaeda in our survey, so I don't think it's a strict gender divide. But I do think that the way forward is to, A, get rid of divisive multicultural policies and to engage with Muslims directly rather than through these unelected community leaders. But B, and I do agree with much of what David Cameron says, which is to inspire people, to say that there are values that we believe in.
Well, like what? Ditch multiculturalism and supplant it with what?
Well, I think that there are certain values associated with the West, Enlightenment values such as freedom of speech, freedom of belief, a belief in human progress, in human reason. These are things that actually any culture, any religious group might sign up to. And I think that we've lost our sense of, what our society is for. And there's a real anti-Britishness, anti-Western feeling, that all our society is good for is producing consumer goods, that we're materialistic, and that this is a really one-sided picture of our world. And it's a rather crude picture, which some younger Muslims have taken up. And I think we just need to be much more positive and confident in asserting what our society stands for. And that's not, imposing a test or telling people what they have to believe. It's about coming up with ideas that people genuinely can be inspired by.
It sounds like a clash of civilizations to me. How would you describe it?
Oh, I don't think it is. I don't think it's a clash between the Muslim and the Western world. And in fact, the point about the survey is to show that it's younger Muslims in the West who are signing up to these anti-Western views. And in fact, their parents who come from abroad, who were brought up in Muslim countries, are more likely to believe in things like free speech than their children. So it's not about a divide between Muslims and the rest of the world. It's a crisis within the West itself, I think, and cultural problems that we have to deal with at home.
Munira Mirza, we very much appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you.